political strife back in England between the king and parliament would lead to several different things that would have to take place in order for there to be a true movement elsewhere in the English colonies. You see, Charles I actually had a tenuous relationship with parliament, and various different taxation rules to try and garner money led to various different strife, him dissolving parliament, bringing it back, but there being different political factions that would eventually come to blows. And those that supported parliamentary action actually defeated King Charles and his army, if you will, thereby taking temporary control of the English government, if you will, okay, and English control, and establishing Oliver Cromwell as the protector of England, if you will. And it was under this time frame that you would have Cromwell's design to perhaps take over some of the Spanish colonies in the Caribbean, the gateway to the Gulf of Mexico, and elsewhere into North America. And some of his plans were done. For example, the English were able to wrest present-day Jamaica from the Spaniards. They weren't able to get Puerto Rico or Cuba or the island of Hispaniola. And so, eventually, Cromwell passed away, and Charles II, the son of King Charles, the defeated King Charles I, was able to be restored to power. And what made him different was that he was not Catholic himself, although on his deathbed he would convert, but he was pro-Catholic in a very non-Catholic England, very pro-Church of England. Many people thought that Charles II would be hell-bent on Catholicizing England again, but in reality he wanted to kind of float and tread lightly. But in doing so, Charles II would make territory available by charter, this time south of Virginia, but north of Spanish Florida. And he would establish these colonies with various different freedoms for religious faith, not to have a specific Church of England mentality, and of course not like puritanical up in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But he established the idea that there would be a colony south of Virginia, which would be largely agrarian based, that would be split up into various different parcels. And this territory would be known as the Carolina Territory. Okay? And in Carolina, you saw several of the settlers prominently figure in the south, and a number of them in the north. What you saw was in the south part of the Carolina Territory was a group of elite and very wealthy landowners who would eventually make their way and establish ties with the Caribbean island of Barbados. They would grow tobacco. There would be a substantial African slave trade in that part of Carolina into the Caribbean. You would also have the establishment of Charlestown. We know that now as Charleston, South Carolina. And you would have largely a proprietorship that became pretty wealthy in the southern part of Carolina. The northern part of Carolina was largely inhabited by poorer whites who did not have as much land. They were considered backcountry white people. And this created strife as you have differentiation of society and wealth between northern Carolinians and southern Carolinians. Something would have to eventually give. And eventually, what became North Carolina and South Carolina was actually split when, in the 1720s, the Carolina Territory was actually split. So, African slavery had taken root, largely from the island of Barbados into the sugar trade, South Carolina in particular was deemed as having an ideal climate to grow sugar. And then, of course, the climate in the Caribbean is also deemed such as well. So you'd have a natural trade, including a slave trade. Okay? So that's how you have North and South Carolina established. First, they were just Carolina. And then you have differentiation among peoples who settled there. And for economic and political reasons, they were split. Further, up north, you have obviously Virginia and Maryland in the Chesapeake region. And then you have north of there, New England, the Puritans up in Massachusetts Bay Colony and elsewhere, Connecticut, now Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire. What about that area in between? That area north of Maryland, but south of Connecticut? That area is controlled by the Dutch. You see, the Dutch were also in North America, and they had established the town of New Amsterdam, which was purchased, basically, the island of Manhattan, New Amsterdam, was purchased by the Dutch from natives and settled with African slaves and their Dutch West Indies trade. And then you have other Europeans who had also settled there, also from places like Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, places like that. The problem was the Dutch were a big English rival. Okay? They were rivals to the Dutch. They were a threat. And then also, Dutch North America lay right smack in the middle between New England and the Chesapeake colonies. So England wanted that entire seaboard. And if you could oust the Dutch, one, you stick it to your European rival, but then also you unify English North America. And that's what King Charles set out to do. He identified that area in and around present-day New York to wrest from the Dutch. And by 1674, they had done just that. The Dutch were in North America, but they weren't quite as resource advantaged as some of the other European powers. And eventually, the English were able to force the Dutch out of North America. And in doing so, they linked New England with the Chesapeake colonies, with that mid-Atlantic region. So now, New Amsterdam was renamed to New York. And then also you have the territory just to the west of where modern-day New York City is, also established. You now have New Jersey established as a colony, and then of course Delaware, which is in the very southern end of or very northern end of the Chesapeake, but also just south of New Jersey as well. So New Jersey would not have a large contingency of landowners, but you did have a new venture for people to move to. So you have New York, New Jersey, Delaware, all now connected with New England and the Chesapeake region.